Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Ever wondered about the hidden story behind something huge, something so well known, so well life-changing that it kind of feels like it just popped up fully formed? What if the real roots of, say, one of the world's biggest recovery movements were actually tucked away in a spiritual revival that, most people haven't even heard of today? It's a pretty interesting thought, right? Like digging up a bit of spiritual history? Well, that's exactly what we're doing today. Our deep dive is into the Oxford Group connection. We're going to sort of pull back the curtain on this spiritual movement. Before Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, became this, global thing we all recognize, this group really shaped its first ideas, its core practices. And this isn't just like a historical side note. It's about understanding the actual blueprint for recovery, a lineage that's, well, surprising and really rich.
Exactly. That's our mission today, really, to dig into the core ideas of the Oxford Group. We'll look at their practices, their beliefs, and crucially trace that direct line. Show how their ethical framework, these four absolutes they call them, honesty, purity, unselfishness, love how they became the direct spiritual ancestors of AA's 12 steps. It's about uncovering those foundations that often get, well, overlooked, giving you a clearer picture of where this whole fellowship really started. It's a story of how these deep spiritual insights got distilled into something practical, something life-changing.
Right. And to piece this fascinating story together, we've been sorting through quite a bit. Historical accounts, personal stories from back then, foundational texts. We're weaving it all together to give you, hopefully, more than just a quick summary of this key historical link. Maybe a deeper, more personal feel for the principles behind so much of modern recovery. You really hear echoes of these ideas all over the place, even today, in self-help, spiritual growth, all sorts of things. The Oxford Group, a spiritual seedbed for recovery. Okay, so let's start with the Oxford Group itself. A lot of you listening might not know much about it. But back in its day, it was this really vibrant, grassroots spiritual movement. Our sources call it a collection of groups active for Christ in many countries, and really gets across how, decentralized it was, almost organic. Can you picture it? No big churches, no rigid hierarchy. They met in ordinary places where ordinary men and women are accustomed to meet. Homes, community rooms, maybe even hotel lounges. When you think about that, doesn't it sound a lot like how early Christians gathered? Or, yeah, how early AA meetings started. There was this really accessible, down-to-earth feel that must have been part of its appeal.
Oh, absolutely. And that accessibility wasn't just a side thing. It was central to their mission, which was huge, really. Their main goal was nothing less than the redemption of individuals and nations from sin and to keep alive the faith for which Christ came on earth.
Wow, that's ambitious. That sounds almost intimidating.
It does. But what's so interesting is that it wasn't some, top-down church thing run by clergy. Quite the opposite. The sources really stress that laymen of many nationalities, creeds, professions, and outlook form the nucleus of these meetings. So this wide mix of people, this feeling of being a movement by the people, that was key to their ultimate goal. Changing lives to change the world to Christ. It was bold, definitely. Driven by this idea that one changed life could ripple outwards, change society, start small, aims big.
And it was those personal changes, those changed lives, as they called them, that really pulled people in. The Oxford Group wasn't just about agreeing with ideas or going to services. It was about practical, lived spirituality, about actually doing things to change your life. Our sources talk about these spiritual activities that were, well, indispensable for people, not abstract ideas, but daily practices, things that reshaped how you thought, acted, dealt with the world.
And what's really insightful is how they presented these practices. They weren't saying, hey, look at this radical new thing we invented. No, they framed it as getting back to the simple tenets of simple Christianity. Like one core practice was seeking God's guidance. They described it really clearly. Listening to, accepting, relying on God's guidance and carrying it out in everything we do or say, great or small. So not waiting for a lightning bolt,
Right.
More like cultivating this inner listening, this practical, moment-by-moment direction for everyday stuff, big or small, a constant active partnership.
And a key part of getting that guidance, maybe the most foundational part, was what they call quiet times. Can you sort of paint a picture of what that involved? It sounds like a really personal, almost meditative thing.
Yeah.
The materials say members would give their minds to God free from doubts and distractions. The goal was absolute negation to everything but our conviction that He can and will tell us what He thinks best for us to do. That sounds incredibly hard, like trying to empty your mind completely.
It does.
And interestingly, they warned against vain repetitions in prayer. They wanted spontaneous, from-the-heart communication, not just reciting words. It encouraged a real, unfiltered connection, didn't it? Not ritual, but relationship.
Exactly. It was about getting past the external stuff of religion to the core connection. And that practice, that inner listening, that direct line during quiet times, it led straight into another key activity, witnessing or sharing. This meant sharing with others the main reasons and the concrete results of our surrender to God. But it wasn't just, talking about Christianity or trying to argue someone into believing. It was about showing real concrete change in your life. Like one source says, piously, the Oxford group's joy in living and working in itself manifests Christ better than any words.
Wow.
It wasn't about clever arguments. It was about showing them, through your own transformed life, that these principles actually worked. Personal testimony made real. Visible change.
And the change was deep, wasn't it? Not just surface behavior stuff. There's this quote from a member describing his experience. He talks about surrendering his indifference to other people. Think about that, the self-centeredness we can all get trapped in, and then being caught up in a new harmony that beggars all description. That points to a really radical internal shift, right? A deep connection, a spiritual resonance. Beyond just intellectual belief, it really shows the power these practices had. Not just changing actions, but fundamentally reshaping someone's inner world. Moving from isolation to real connection. The four absolutes, pillars of a changed life. Okay, so this brings us right to the heart of the Oxford Group's ethical framework, the principles that really paved the way for AA, the Four Absolutes. These weren't just nice ideas. They were explicitly called honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. And they were seen as, well, absolute standards for a life guided by God. Our sources really emphasize these, and here's a crucial link for us. They were specifically retained by Acronites even after a 1939 separation.
That's key.
Right, the Acronites, that's the early AA folks in Akron, Ohio, where it all really started cooking. And the 1939 separation, that's when early AA formally split from the wider Oxford group, or the Buchmanite movement, as it was also known after its founder, Frank Buchman. So these absolutes were literally carried over directly, intact, right into AA's early spiritual DNA.
Absolutely critical, that lineage. And what's so telling is how central these principles stayed even after that formal split. There's another source talking specifically in an AA context that lists faith, honesty, purity, unselfishness, love, and service as the guides for a victorious life. So this isn't just some dusty historical fact we're digging up. It really underlines their direct, ongoing relevance. They were the moral compass for recovery. Not optional extras, but absolute essentials for building a transformed life.
So let's unpack them, starting with absolute honesty. This one starts inside, right? With facing yourself, no illusions, no pretending. You see it right there in the message Ebby Thatcher, Bill W.'s friend and sponsor, brought him early on. Get honest with yourself. It's the starting line, the first step before anything else can happen. But what does that really mean, get honest with yourself, especially if you're caught up in addiction?
Oh, it's way deeper than just telling the truth to other people. It's about taking apart that whole tangled mess of denial, rationalization, self-deception, the stuff addiction feeds on. And this idea, this radical self-honesty, it connects directly, powerfully to AA steps 4 and 5. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. That's all about looking inward, unflinchingly, examining character defects, resentments, fears, the harm you've done. It's a tough self-look.
Yeah.
Then step 5, admitting to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. This stresses the necessity for complete honesty, for real sobriety. It's about tearing down the walls of self-deception, laying yourself bare. It's more than confession. It's this profound self-revelation that breaks the secrecy and shame cycle.
That sounds incredibly hard. Radical honesty. Humans, we're experts at managing how people see us, aren't we?
Yeah.
Maybe especially with ourselves. I remember reading St. Augustine confessing he made himself out worse than I was in order that I might not go lacking for praise. That's such a human thing, right? Twisting things to manage perception.
Exactly.
So true honesty means taking off all the masks, dropping the stories we tell ourselves to justify things or protect our ego. Takes real courage to face the unvarnished truth, even when nobody's watching.
Absolutely. And this is where having a sponsor in AA becomes so incredibly important. It echoes that Oxford group idea of sharing, of witness. A sponsor who's been through it helps the newcomer by sharing their own flaws openly, showing them, hey, your situation isn't strange or unique.
Agrees a safe space.
Right, a safe space for that fearlessly honest self-look, helping them spot, admit, and correct these flaws, not just once, but like daily. It's not a one-and-done confession. It's this ongoing vigilance, self-awareness, adjustment. Honesty becomes a way of living, not just a single act.
Okay, moving to the second absolute. Absolute purity. This one goes beyond just, outward behavior, doesn't it? Seems like it's about something much deeper. An internal cleansing, almost.
It really does. The sources link it to the Sermon on the Mount, defining righteousness, which is close to purity, as not merely right conduct, but right thinking on all subjects in every department of life.
Yeah.
And this is based on a profound idea. Any outward act is but the sequel to a thought.
Ah, okay. So if every action starts with a thought.
Exactly. Then purity isn't just about not taking a drink or avoiding some harmful action. It's about actively retraining your mind, catching and challenging the initial thoughts that lead to those self-defeating behaviors. It's about cultivating a whole new internal landscape where those destructive urges get stopped at the source, not just suppressed after they've already got going. It shifts the focus from just stopping to this radical mental and spiritual discipline, aiming for integrity right at the core.
And this internal sorting out, this right thinking, it translates into action, like redemption from sin and getting straight with the world around by making restitution. That links directly to AA's process, right? Identifying past harms, addressing them, recognizing and actively changing those self-defeating behaviors.
Definitely.
So it's not just stopping the bleeding, but cleaning up the mess from the past, making things right where you can, and consciously choosing new, healthier ways forward, taking responsibility.
And crucially, getting straight isn't only about others. It includes healing the self by making amends to yourself. Our recovery, staying sober, working the steps that becomes the living amends we make to ourselves.
That's powerful.
Isn't it? This process starts healing that deep, often hidden harm done to our self-esteem, our bodies, and our relationships by addiction. It's holistic healing. It recognizes the self was harmed too and works to restore that inner relationship, reclaiming your worth.
This idea of purity and deep internal change, it makes me think of that term, the dry drunk. Our sources warn about just stopping drinking without addressing the behaviors, habits, or emotions that led them to drinking in the first place. They say it results in a miserable state of affairs. Can you maybe elaborate on that miserable state of affairs? Because it feels like a really key difference between just not drinking and actual transformation. The sources say there's no inner development there.
Yeah, that's a critical distinction. The dry drunk is someone who's physically sober, sure, but they're still carrying around all those character defects, those unhealthy thought patterns that drove their drinking. It's a state of real emotional, spiritual stuckness.
So like irritable, resentful.
Exactly. Irritable, resentful, self-pitying, impatient, maybe dishonest, just without the booze.
Yeah.
That miserable state of affairs is that inner turmoil. The substance is gone, but the underlying spiritual disease, the self-centeredness, the fear, the anger, it's still running the show. There's no inner development because the core work, changing thoughts, changing behaviors, cultivating honesty and purity, it hasn't happened. It really highlights that sobriety isn't just the absence of alcohol, it's the presence of inner growth, a changing character. Without that, just being dry is often pretty shaky and, frankly, unsatisfying.
Okay, third, absolute. Absolute unselfishness. This one shifts the focus outward, doesn't it, to action, to giving. That feels like a radical shift from the self-absorption that addiction often involves. How did the Oxford group approach this, especially in a world that often rewards self-interest?
They put a really strong, uncompromising focus on giving that demands no reward, either in approval, prestige, or money. This principle, profoundly unselfish, became the absolute bedrock for AA's 12th step. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. It's about giving just for the sake of giving. No strings attached, no expectation of getting something back, not even recognition or thanks.
Just pure service.
Pure altruistic service, understanding that helping others is its own reward. And in fact, it's vital for your own continued recovery. It's turning outward when maybe every instinct tells you to turn inward.
And that connects so clearly to AA's primary purpose, to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. It's not about promoting AA or building some organization. It's about offering support to anyone who's in need of it. That's a really wide, compassionate net, isn't it?
It is.
It reaches not just the newcomers struggling in their first month, but long-timers too, or even people not in the program at all. Just by living the principles. The message is carried through action, through being there, through shared experience.
Which leads right into one of AA's most powerful and sometimes misunderstood ideas. Attraction, not promotion. The core idea is that people will be drawn into recovery and want to stay if they see we have something they desire, like lasting sobriety, peace of mind, a sense of purpose, but not if we try to sell them.
It's subtle.
Very subtle, but incredibly effective. There's that great quote, "Example is not the main thing in influencing others, it is the only thing." This way, the message reaches anyone, anywhere, not through pushy advertising, but through genuine lived experience, the undeniable proof of changed lives. It's the quiet power of just being authentic.
And finally, the fourth absolute, absolute love. This feels like the spiritual glue holding it all together, animating everything. Not just a nice feeling, but an active, transformative force. A deep spiritual state running through the whole recovery process.
Exactly. The Oxford Group talked about Christ's love is absolute, this foundational, unconditional love. In AA, that evolves into the concept of a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. It acknowledges this universal, unconditional love that guides and holds the fellowship together, but it's understood personally by each member. It's like the spiritual gravity keeping the community intact, fostering acceptance and healing. It's the complete opposite of the isolation and self-hatred that often comes with addiction.
And experiencing that love is deeply personal, but also really communal. It's about moving out of isolation, which is such a painful part of addiction, and finding a sense of intimacy and belonging. Through connection, acceptance, compassion within the group, for so many, that must be a profound counter experience to the loneliness and shame they've carried, rediscovering their place maybe for the first time.
And the transformative power of this love, once you embrace it, it's capable of literally running our lives for us, guiding choices, actions, inspiring this outgoing love from a heart that's just brimming with gratitude. It's not passive. It's an active force that can even lead to radical things like loving your enemy.
How does that work?
It means consciously deciding not to mentally fight back against people who cause you trouble, people you'd naturally resent. Instead, you try to focus on the presence of God in all situations, even difficult ones with difficult people. It's a truly profound spiritual practice, letting go of resentment, finding compassion even for those who push your buttons, and letting that love guide your inner and outer life. It's about freeing yourself from the prison of your own anger and hurt. Third, from Oxford Group to Alcoholics Anonymous, the direct lineage.
Okay, so we've got the Oxford Group, the four absolutes, these amazing pillars for a changed life. Now let's trace the direct path, that unbroken line, right into the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this story really starts with one key person, Ebby Thatcher, Bill W.'s old friend. Ebby was the messenger. He brought Bill W. a clear, practical set of spiritual actions. He didn't just talk vaguely, he gave him a blueprint.
Absolutely. Ebby's message to Bill was basically a concentrated dose of the Oxford Group way, a step-by-step guide out of what seemed like a hopeless situation. He told Bill,
Yeah.
get honest with yourself, there's absolute honesty. Make a self-survey, that's the precursor to step 4. Then talk it out with the other guy, hinting at step 5.
Wow, it's all there.
It really is. He continued, quit living alone and begin to get straight with the world around by making restitution. Clear link to purity, steps 8 and 9. He pushed Bill to try the kind of giving that demands no reward either in approval, prestige, or money. That's absolute unselfishness, step 12. And finally, you ask whatever higher power there is, even if it is just as an experiment, to help you find the grace to be released from alcoholism. That covers God's guidance and absolute love. You can literally hear the 4 absolutes echoing in every single instruction he gave Bill.
But Bill W., he didn't just jump right in, did he? It's fascinating. Our sources talk about his initial skepticism, even real resistance. He actually said he needed to bar hop his way down 23rd Street for fortification.
Right, he needed drinks.
Before he could even face investigating the Oxford Group at their headquarters. Can you just imagine that internal battle? Needing alcohol just to go to a spiritual meeting.
It speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really shows how deep his addiction and his own self-will went. The resistance was huge.
Which makes his eventual turnaround even more powerful. His journey went from flat-out refusing to place God first, total self-will, to finding this bright promise and meaning in those words, of myself I am nothing, the Father doeth the works. That wasn't just him agreeing intellectually. It was a transforming spiritual experience. It completely shifted his consciousness. And that experience, rooted in what Ebby shared, became the foundation of such success as AA has since achieved. It was this profound, life-changing shift from self-reliance and isolation to depending on a higher power and connecting with others, a direct result of these principles taking hold in him.
And that leads us to Akron, Ohio, and the famous meeting with Dr. Bob, Bill W., and Dr. Bob, the co-founders. Their first meeting is legendary. Started with Bill's incredibly intuitive line, "Guess you're pretty thirsty, aren't you?" A simple acknowledgement of their shared pain.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Bob just admitted it. That led to this hours-long talk where Bill shared his story, shared Ebby's message from the Oxford group. That conversation, born out of desperation, changed everything.
And here's the really significant part. Dr. Bob was already involved with the Oxford group. He'd been trying, really trying to get sober using their methods for a couple of years, but hadn't managed to stay sober. Our sources are clear. The Akronites, that first AA group that formed around Bill and Bob in Akron, even after they formally split from the main Oxford group, the Buchmannite movement, in 1939, they retained the Oxford group four absolutes.
No, they kept the core.
They kept the core. It wasn't just a coincidence. It shows that direct, unbroken line. These principles were the foundation they built AA on, even as they became their own thing. The spiritual bedrock was solid.
Though, interestingly, even with that shared foundation, there was this sense of separateness, some resistance among the early drunks, as they called themselves, to the Oxford group's specific way of doing things, like the guidance thing. Some found it too technical and detailed.
Yeah, that's mentioned.
It sounds like the principles clicked, but maybe the specific religious language or some of the rigid practices were a hurdle for some. I think that kind of hints at why AA needed its own, more adaptable approach, one that would end up being so much more successful globally.
That's a really crucial point.
It showed the core ideas were powerful, but the packaging needed to be flexible, to reach everyone, no matter their religious background or lack of one.
Exactly. AA didn't just photocopy the Oxford group. It adapted the spiritual principles. It stripped away the explicitly Christian dogma, the specific terminology, to make them work for a much wider range of alcoholics. It was an evolution. Keep the spiritual core, keep the ethics, but broaden the language, broaden the path.
Make it more universal.
Precisely. That pragmatic adaptation was one of AA's masterstrokes. It allowed it to become this truly global fellowship.
And that adaptation led to this massive, almost revolutionary shift in how alcoholism itself was understood. It went from being seen mainly as a moral degradation, a character flaw, a lack of willpower, to being understood as a spiritual disease.
Huge shift.
Wasn't it just? It opened the door for compassion, for understanding, for a path to healing and spiritual growth, instead of just judgment and blame. It reframed the whole problem, not a moral failing, but an illness needing a spiritual fix.
Absolutely transformative. It moved away from blaming the person and opened the door for a spiritual remedy. And in that whole process of adaptation, Dr. Bob's famous advice, keep it simple, became like a guiding star.
Right. KISS.
Exactly. Keep it simple, stupid. Or just keep it simple. It was about making these deep spiritual ideas practical and accessible within AA, making sure the program worked for anybody from any background without needing a theology degree. It distilled profound truths into everyday actions. Easy to grasp, easy to apply. That was key. The 12 steps, an embodiment of the absolute.
Okay, so now let's really look at how those four absolutes from the Oxford group show up explicitly, almost elegantly, in AA's 12 steps. It's a beautiful line, seeing how these foundational ideas got turned into a concrete program. Let's start with steps 1, 2, and 3. How do they reflect absolute honesty and absolute love? Step 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. That's not just casually saying, yeah, I drink too much. It's profound, radical honesty, isn't it?
Totally.
A moment of complete defeat, like admitting total bankruptcy. All your own efforts have failed. What does that admission really mean for someone who's maybe fought this for years?
It means shattering that illusion of control. It's the ego finally giving up the fight. And yes, admitting powerlessness, unmanageability. It's a deep, often painful act of honesty. Humiliating, sometimes. But here's the paradox, the transformation. That surrender, that complete defeat, it cracks open the door to hope.
Yeah.
It creates a space for something new to come in.
Yeah.
And that's where step 2 fits. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. It's that first opening, considering a solution outside yourself. And then the decision in step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. A quote. This whole sequence, starting with brutal honesty, it pulls people out of isolation. It moves them toward relying on what they find as a loving and powerful hand of God, or, for many, just the power of the group, that collective strength. It's a journey from isolated despair to connected hope, fueled by honesty and this emerging sense of a guiding, compassionate love.
Then we get to steps 4, 5, 6, and 7. These seem to dive right into absolute purity and honesty, focusing hard on getting to know ourselves. This is where the really deep maybe uncomfortable internal work starts, right? What does that searching and fearless moral inventory in step 4 really mean? It's more than just listing bad things you did.
Oh, much more. Step four's searching and fearless moral inventory isn't just a laundry list of wrongs. It's an honest look at our character defects, things like selfishness, resentment, fear, dishonesty, but also, importantly, recognizing our assets too, our good qualities we can build on. This self-knowledge is vital because it helps you understand the roots of your behavior, not just the actions themselves.
Okay.
Then step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. This is described as difficult but necessary to sobriety and peace of mind. It's the moment where true connection starts forming with man and God. It breaks isolation, relieves that awful burden of secrets and shame. The sources really hammer home the necessity for complete honesty, warning about rationalization that can just sabotage the whole thing. This open sharing helps you lose sense of isolation, receive forgiveness and give it, learn humility, gain honesty and realism about ourselves. It's a real purification, made possible by honesty.
And it's not just about looking back and admitting stuff. Steps 8 and 9, making amends, they're about actively renewing and recreating our relationships, including, as you mentioned earlier, making amends to ourselves. Recognizing recovery itself, staying sober, working the steps is like the living amends we make to ourselves, healing that harm done to our self-esteem, our bodies, and our relationships.
Absolutely. It's a complete repair job. Making amends isn't just saying sorry. It's about rebuilding trust, truly making things right where possible, and living differently going forward, showing a real change of heart. This action, rooted in honesty and purity, frees us from guilt and lets us rebuild those broken connections. And yes, that idea of living amends to ourselves is incredibly powerful. It means treating ourselves with respect, our bodies, our minds, living in a way that honors the sobriety we found. It's an ongoing commitment to personal integrity and healing. Self-compassion, really.
Okay, so the final steps, 10, 11, and 12. These seem to focus on keeping it going, right? Ongoing spiritual maintenance.
Exactly. Continuous self-reflection, prayer, meditation, and crucially, that 12th step work, carrying the message to other alcoholics. This is where absolute unselfishness and absolute love really shine, moving from looking inward to acting outward and keeping the spiritual practice alive day by day.
And the result of consistently doing all this, it's more than just not drinking. It leads to the gift of a more balanced and joyous life.
Yeah.
It's not instant, but this sustained journey of growth that touches every part of your life, finding new freedom, new purpose.
And that core idea that sobriety can't be kept unless it is given away, that really sums up the profound unselfishness built into the program.
You keep it by giving it away.
Right. You secure your own recovery by helping someone else find theirs. It perfectly embodies that design for living that really works. It works through constantly applying these principles: honesty, purity, unselfishness, love, and staying connected to that sense of a loving God. It's this amazing feedback loop.
Yeah.
You give, you keep, and light keeps getting passed on. VA's distinct identity, broadening the path.
So, okay, AA clearly came directly from the Oxford group in many ways, but it definitely developed its own unique flavor, becoming much more inclusive, more adaptable, and maybe the most brilliant, most crucial adaptation was that concept. A God of my understanding.
Monumental?
Wasn't it just? It threw the spiritual doors wide open, even for people who, as our sources say, resisted AA in part because of the words higher power, never mind the word God. It just bypassed so many potential roadblocks.
Absolutely essential for its global reach. So many people walking into AA, broken, desperate, maybe had huge issues with organized religion or just couldn't buy into a traditional God concept, but a God of my understanding. That let them define a higher power in their own terms. Maybe it was nature, the universe, the group itself, whatever worked for them.
Right, personalize it.
Exactly. It let them admit, without getting stuck on dogma, that yeah, they were a weak person who couldn't handle their own life and they needed all the help they could get. That practical step helped them get past the word God, if it was a barrier, and embrace a spiritual solution, one they could connect with, finding a power greater than themselves, however they saw it.
And focusing on that personal understanding, it let AA rise above specific religious arguments. It offered this broader spiritual awakening not tied to any one church or creed, making it genuinely universal, a spiritual path for anyone wanting to stop drinking. That was revolutionary.
Another hugely significant principle for AA's identity directly linked to selflessness is anonymity. This tradition reminds everyone to place principles before personalities. It's this vital protection against ego, against anyone becoming a star or a guru in the fellowship.
Keeps the focus right.
Exactly. Keeps the focus squarely on the message, the program, not on any individual, no matter how well-known or charismatic. Anonymity is genuinely a spiritual principle. It fosters humility, equality.
And that connects back to AA's whole public relations approach, attraction rather than promotion. We touched on it, but it's key to their identity. The sources say flat out, there is never need to praise ourselves, and we feel it better to let our friends recommend us, deliberately avoiding sensational advertising.
Yeah.
It's a quiet confidence, isn't it? Trusting the results will speak for themselves. Builds trust, not hype.
And underpinning its independence, its integrity, is AA's rock-solid commitment to being financially self-supporting. They intentionally refuse outside money, even from well-meaning people or groups, to avoid any external influence. The principle is simple. Whoever pays the piper is apt to call the tune.
Makes sense.
It guarantees AA stays focused only on its primary purpose, helping alcoholics free from any strings or distractions that outside funding could bring. It's a powerful declaration of independence and focus.
And related to that, AA stays forever non-professional, meaning that 12th step work, that vital carrying the message, it's never to be paid for. That reinforces the spirit of unselfish service straight from the Oxford Group's DNA, giving without reward, and it keeps the motive pure. It's about real help, real connection, no commercial angle. Outro.
It really is fascinating when you trace it back, isn't it? How the Oxford Group's core spiritual ideas, especially those four absolutes, honesty, purity, unselfishness, love, provided such a strong yet flexible blueprint for Alcoholics Anonymous. They really shaped the 12 steps into this incredibly powerful, adaptable path to recovery that's helped countless people all over the world. This journey, from a specific spiritual movement to a universal program, it just shows the lasting power and practical value of these core principles, no matter the time or place.
It's incredible, yeah. Seeing how deeply these spiritual, ethical ideas were woven right into the fabric of a movement that's had such a massive global impact. This deep dive, I think, really shows how profound, maybe abstract-sounding principles can actually play out in really practical, tangible, life-changing ways. You've hopefully gotten a real insight into this surprising rich lineage, understanding not just what AA is, but maybe a bit more about why it works on such a deep fundamental level.
And maybe this leaves us with a thought to chew on. Considering how these core principles from the Oxford Group were so carefully adapted, so distilled into AA, what other big movements or systems in society, maybe even our own personal beliefs, might have similar kind of hidden spiritual or ethical roots that are still influencing them, even if nobody really talks about those origins anymore? What might we find if we started looking for these absolutes, honesty, purity, unselfishness, love, in other parts of our lives, other parts of history? It's definitely something interesting to think about, isn't it?